Our teacher of political science out at LCCC. I taught the Constitution, spent lots of time looking it over. I have to say, in all of that time, not once did I talk about Article 5. Now, why? We hadn't used it, and it wasn't that I felt that we were missing the boat. I just overlooked it. I'm sorry, but since that time, I've had great teachers, among who you heard last week when you considered this bill, this bill. And thank you very much for the efforts that you're putting in on this. I know many of you have worked very hard. I think that we're both headed in kind of in the same direction. We're doing a few things that we didn't. We think we did some things that you have not. So I don't know that I can answer any questions, but I'd be glad if there's...
Any questions for former Speaker McElveen?
Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to testify? Sir.
Hi. Brian Miller, Sheridan County. Down here as a citizen. As many may know, 2 years ago I ran for the United States Senate. And the premise of my entire campaign was dealt with what's going on in Washington, D.C. and changing the methodology. At that point in time, I'd learned a little bit about the Convention of the States. Hadn't been that convinced that that was the right thing to do and that we could do it from inside. Since then, I have been convinced by a lot of research that I've done, by listening to people who are much more knowledgeable than I am in those areas, and I believe that, as my fellow constituent here said, an intervention is required. In order for us to bring what's going on in DC back to the state level, I'm not saying change all the items of the Constitution that people worry about, the 14th Amendment, all those things. That we're going to change all that. No, we're not. That is not the point. The point is to rein in the activism on the federal government side on taking the power of the states away. And I believe that is really what we're looking at. And so I rise in support of this. Like I said, I'll talk to anybody who wants to talk about it, and I'll answer any questions. And remember, this is what we're all looking at.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Miller. Any questions? Thank you. Anybody else wish to testify? You all good? Okay, seeing none, we'll bring it before the committee.
Second.
Moved by Winters, second by Pinal. Would anyone like to suggest an amendment?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Vice Chairman?
Mr. Chairman, I would propose an amendment, and I think also that some of you have the language in front of you at this time. And what it would do is on page 5 after line 15, it would insert a new Romanette. In much discussion with people across the state and also in our two chambers, there was very specific concern regarding on page 2, lines 22 and 23, which limits the terms of office for members of Congress. And so this is something, and I had speculated on this well before I even thought I would ever run for legislature. Many, many years ago, and I was asked a question in Basin, Wyoming, in my district, when I was initially running for office, and someone asked the question of term limits. And I mentioned that at the federal level, I would not want to see it any less than 18 years, and maybe in the Wyoming legislature any less than 16. And partially it's because, here's my thinking on it anyway, when you take an executive, especially in the executive branches, they have by nature a bully pulpit. And it takes time for members in Congress to gain the horsepower, we could use that term, that is necessary to gain the weight, the gravitas necessary to move things forward, and sometimes to even provide a small counterbalance to the natural bully pulpit of the executive branch. In 18 years, it is quite a long length of time, and yet it's not as long, even remotely as long, as many have served in either chamber. Secondly, I am reminded, and I believe it's Federalist 43, where Mr. Madison spoke strongly against term limits for members of Congress. And I do hold that his perspectives are very enlightening, and I happen to agree with him. And so if we were to have restrictions on a length of term for members of Congress, I think, Mr. Chairman, that it should be for a substantial length of time still. And so with that, I would propose this amendment. I move this amendment.
Okay. And Mr. Vice Chairman, is this added to paragraph 7, or is it a new paragraph 8 over on page 5?
Mr. Chairman, this comes in on page number 5 and actually changes the period on line 15 to a semicolon, and then adds a new Romanette, a new paragraph, which would be Romanette 8, and so a whole new subsection.
Thank you. Any other comments on the proposed amendment?
Did we get a second? Mr.
We did, it was, I know.
Thank
Oh,
you.
on the amendment? That was on the, I thought we were moving the bill.
Yeah, we're moving the amendment.
Okay, did we not have one on the amendment? Okay, we need a second on the amendment.
I'll second.
Okay, second by Olson. All right, now any further comment? Representative Jennings?
Mr. Chairman, maybe this is just a question for legal minds, but it seems to me like this amendment, in my mind, might be binding on future legislatures. Where the first part of this states that they may, this says that they are instructed. So we're kind of, it seems like we might be binding someone out there in the future on this piece of legislation for a future legislation. Maybe the legal minds could speak to that.
Or the Vice Chairman's legal mind, you'd like to address it?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not a legal mind, it's more theological in nature, but I would say that on this particular subject, every decision that you make in that chamber over there, especially in regards to the conduct of a member on a commission or people that have been appointed to various positions, all of those are binding. And they are binding beyond a single legislative session. And in this sense, that's exactly what it should do in this context, and that is my non-legal opinion.
Okay, Representative Olson.
Mr. Chairman, just to add to those thoughts, we actually have in state law, and the hour grows late, so the exact statute isn't on the top of my head, but we have statutes addressing delegates already. And so we already have state statutes that do bind delegates' behaviors and activities. In fact, we passed a resolution out of the committee of the whole, actually all the way out of third reading last week, amending some of those statutes, if you recall, Representative Jennings. So I guess when I look at this, I kind of, I think maybe that ultimately I would like to see that activity take place in the statute. I think it's more appropriate there than in the resolution. But maybe it's not wholly problematic. I think it's still the same effect that we have the authority to bind those delegates by state law, no different.
Representative Pelkey.
And if it were in statute, we would have no problem changing that in the future. So, I mean, you're not permanently stuck with the language of this amendment or that particular instruction. You can alter it.
Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think just for semantics, I think on page 5, line 10, we'd have to delete the "and" also. Maybe put that in after line 15.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Vice Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I would accept that as a friendly amendment if it's appropriate for my seconder as well.
Seconder? You got that?
Yeah, it sounds good.
Bonnie, you understand what was said there?
On line 10, strike and.
And insert it after line 15.
Yes.
And what?
And insert it after line 15.
Okay.
Yeah, that's good.
Got
Okay.
it. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments on the amendment? Mr. Pinell?
Mr. Chairman,
Representative?
a question. On this particular amendment, would other states maybe have a different term limit I guess what my main question is, we're wording it a little different than maybe what other states are applying. Would that be just the fight in the convention, is that limiting the term limits? I mean, they would come up with a number, this is what we're recommending from this state. They may have another number and it would be fought out in the convention.
Vice Chairman Leonard.
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. This would only be buying the delegate from the state of Wyoming. And also, it doesn't even bind the delegate to vote for a term limit. But it's just saying that if term limits are an option that's brought up at the convention, they can vote for no less than 18 years. But yes, sir, it only binds the Wyoming delegate. So there will be, I'm sure, other ideas that would be brought forward.
Okay, that answers my question.
Any further comments on the amendment? Question been called for. All in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no.
No.
Amendment is carried. Any further suggested amendments? Mr. Vice Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, at the appropriate time, I'd just like to have a closing thought. I have no more amendments.
Okay, anyone else have? Representative Salazar.
I just have a comment before we vote.
Can we handle any amendments? Are there any amendments
I have none.
to be suggested? Okay, then we'll move to just our discussion on the bill prior to the vote, so Representative Salazar.
My only comment is, I have some very good friends here, and I hope my concerns are wrong and misguided. If you all succeed, I will admit my mistake freely in opposing the resolution. The federal government is out of control, and I wish you success without the concerns that I foresee. So that's all I wish to say. Thank you.
Mr. Vice Chairman, did you have anybody else before we hear the closing comment here from the Vice Chairman? Okay, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I don't have a formal closing comment or anything, but earlier this year I was writing in my journal, and I'm no political scientist, but I did write down, and at first I named it Nathan's Law of Political Power, and I thought, well, that sounds very arrogant. So I scratched that out. But my thought is this: it's greater political power either tries to absorb competing political powers into itself, or to render those powers ineffective. And I think if you were to search that thought through history, you would see that it's true. And we have watched that continually in our country. Our country, where we were designed as a compound government between the federal government and the collective state governments, we've let down our end. The states, instead of collectively working together to hold Washington, D.C. in check, we have dropped the rope, if you will. We have allowed them to grow more and more powerful. And it was alluded to earlier by Mr. Meckler, but in looking backwards, and again, I'm no historian, but I was thinking of this as well. I think that one could see in 1912, in 1932, in 1964, and in 2008, there were fundamental shifts, massive watershed moments regarding the direction of our country and the way our policy would be shaped. And it moved us away from the original intentions of our founding document. And as a result, many would say, of course, that we're still living according to the Constitution, and they wouldn't be wrong. But we're living according to the Constitution as it has been reinterpreted again and again away from its original intentions. And if we don't do this, if we don't, as the state, stand up and take the power that we have been given by Article 5, the question is, what will we have left? And so with that, Mr. Chairman, I am very appreciative to have your consideration and hopefully your approval on House Joint Resolution number 1.
Okay, thank you for your thoughts. Is there a call for questions?
Questions?
Secretary will call the roll.
Representatives Baker,
No.
Beitman,
Aye.
Jennings,
No.
Olson,
Aye.
No.
Pennell,
Aye.
Salazar,
No.
Winters.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, we have a tie, 4-4.
Chairman votes aye.
Mr. Chairman, 5-4, the noes being Baker, Representatives Baker, Jennings, Pelkey, and Salazar.
Bill passes committee 5-4. Thank you, audience, for your participation. Thanks, committee. We had a big day. We worked hard.
Appreciate it.